Every YouTuber out there stares at their screen and they're like, "Hey, am I live? Is this on? Is this working? Yeah, it's live and it's working. And you look like a dodo brain." Hey guys, welcome. Happy Friday to everybody out there. We are doing a really cool episode of Frequency Friday, and let's not. We got a lot to cover, so let's not waste time. I do have some notes here that will help me kind of stay on track. I have my weapon of choice as of late. You guys heard of a Southern Dr. Pepper? This is, I guess it's a Texas thing. I don't know. Espresso, Dr. Pepper, and cream. And this will be my second one for the day. So I'm pretty jacked up, I'm not going to lie. Before we get started, no, not sugar-free. Loads of sugar in here. Nothing but sugar. I even threw a couple of extra pumps of vanilla just in case. I'm using a lav mic. I typically have my Rodecaster and my condenser mic and a gate. So you're going to hear a little bit more of me in this. And if I make weird noises or if I cough, burp, other bodily functions, I apologize in advance. But let's just double check in the chat to make sure that you guys can hear me and everything is coming in clear. Any technical glitches or issues right off the bat, let me know. Sounds good. Okay, cool. All right, guys. So measurements. We are going to dive into speaker measurements today. And I have thought a lot about this video or the concept of this video for quite some time. And it's something that I've always wanted to talk about because I am a reviewer that when it comes to speakers, I do measurements. And anytime that I show those measurements, I think that it's problematic if you don't really know what the heck you're even looking at or what I'm looking at or what I'm talking about. And so this is essentially going to be a primer that will at least help you understand, hardware, setup, and how I conduct a measurement. And I'm going to answer the big question that everybody asks when they look at my measurements. They're like, dude, you're not showing the bass. Like, you're showing from 200 Hertz and up. Like, that's not what. This is weird. That speaker has no bass. And this is a question that is asked all of the time. And so I thought, let me help you guys understand why that is. And we'll kind of take it from there and we'll start working backwards. But let me first explain, at least from my point of view, the purpose of a measurement, from my perspective. And I think this is going to be the best way to open up the conversation and to help you guys understand what I'm trying to achieve or what I'm trying to do when I do a measurement. So speaker comes in for review and I listen to it and I spend time with it and I work on speaker positioning. And what I'm trying to do is figure out, what is this speaker doing? What do I like about it? What do I notice that I don't necessarily like about it? And in my head, what I am attempting to do or trying to do is I'm trying to figure out, if I hear something that is either positive or negative, I'm trying to figure out, I wonder where I might see this in a measurement. I'm wondering if I will see it, and if I do see it, where I will see it. And the same thing can obviously be said about something that's negative. If I hear something that doesn't sound good or great, then in my head, I'm sitting here thinking, man, that female vocal, right? It sounds sharp, or it sounds chalky, or it sounds bright, or I'm entering fatigue. I wonder if and where I will see that when I go to measure this particular loudspeaker. So for me as a reviewer, right, my purpose and my goal in taking the measurements in the first place is to help me understand the why behind what I am hearing, or to help chase down the reasons why I might be hearing something. With that being said, measurements, especially as of late, it seems to me, and this is going to be a major theme throughout this video, it seems to me that it's almost become dogmatic, that it's either only measurements and only measurements matter. And if you don't agree with us, you can go F yourself. It's really like that. Like only the measurements matter. Nothing else matters but the measurements. On the flip side, right, equally dogmatic is measurements don't matter at all. And I don't care about measurements. And, you know, my speaker is totally rad, and I don't give a hoot about its off-axis response or its spectral decay or anything like that. So what I'm hoping to achieve is a conversation that might be helpful in understanding how maybe we can do this and somehow meet in the middle. And I think that we can if we just take a step back and we understand how a measurement, right, can help us understand what we are hearing. Nothing more and nothing less, right? It can help us understand, hey, I really like this speaker. I wonder why I like it. Now, it doesn't matter whether or not the measurements tell you that that speaker sucks or not. It's just, why do you like that speaker? Can we find it in a measurement? And I think that's the most useful thing about a measurement. And we'll get into this a little bit more in just a minute. But I would say, before we dive in, my advice is, for myself and for you guys, is avoid this kind of dogmatic approach to measurements, whether you think measurements matter or don't matter. The best analogy that I could come up with before I was, setting up is, let's build a house. Let's go out and build a house, guys. Let's do it. We just go build a house. And one of you say, okay, well, we need a hammer. We should probably get a hammer. And I say, I don't believe in hammers. Hammers are stupid. Let's just go build a house. And you're going, hey, man, I think a hammer might be useful to build the house. We could probably do it without it. It's been done probably before, but this hammer and these nails might come in handy. We should probably grab a hammer. And so that's kind of the way that I see it and the way that I feel about it after taking, many, many measurements over the years, is when it comes to the design of a loudspeaker, we cannot possibly assume that they just have unicorn magical ears. They never took any kind of a measurement when they were actually making that speaker. And if they did that, often that speaker is not a great performer. It's not great. And on the other hand, equally important, right, is if the manufacturer only relied on measurements, right? So big company, they got a quota, they've got targets to hit in the boardroom meeting. Hey, man, just come up with a little first order on that woofer. What's the worst that can happen? We know that it's going to crap the bed at, 600 Hertz, but they're not going to hear it. We'll call it art. It'll be awesome. They're going to love it. That's equally offensive. And if they only are looking at the schematic, the measurements, then the chances are that speaker is not going to sound all that great either. So again, let's avoid this, right, wrong, and it's only about measurements or it's not about measurements. My thoughts and my mantra here at New Record Day from day one, and it hasn't changed even though I do care about measurements a lot, it comes down to this. Nobody, me, Amir, Danny Ritchie, Andrew Jones, it doesn't, you name whoever, they don't get to tell you whether or not you enjoy a loudspeaker. You get to decide that. So your subjective enjoyment of a loudspeaker is entirely in your hands. It's up to you. What I would encourage you to do is, if that is you, is maybe learn why. And that's what this video is about. It's about why measurements and speaker measurements can help us understand these things. So let's dive in. I know you guys are going to have a lot of questions here, and I will do the best that I can to answer those questions, but let's dive in. I'm going to show you how I measure a loudspeaker, and we're going to answer some of the popular questions that come up, and let's have some fun. All right, so let me set this to the side here. The first thing that I want to show you is, and this is kind of hard to do in my space here, is my setup, okay? So when I conduct a measurement, a speaker measurement, I need a computer, right? And this computer would be connected with a USB cable to this box. This is what is called a Clio Pocket. This is a measurement system. This is the hardware part of the measurement system, okay? It's about, I don't know, $600 or something like that. And it comes with this little microphone, this long rod we're going to talk about in a minute. But this microphone and this box come together, and it includes software. I'm looking at my dumb screen. That's gonna be dumb. I'm gonna turn this thing around so I'm not staring at it. I want to talk to you guys. All right. It's like freaking amateur hour over here at New Record Day. All right, so this box right here, Clio Pocket, hardware, USB into the computer, and it comes with software that talks to everything here, okay? And so, turn my phone off. And so, cable is attached here to the input. That is going through this long rod to the microphone, which is then pointing at the speaker. And we'll talk about that in just a second. The output of Clio, right? So it has an input and an output. The output of Clio, which is analog, is going to this. This is an amplifier. It's a little Class D amplifier that I bought. I double checked to make sure that it is linear in its response, right? There's no active bass boost, awesome circuit in it. It's just a little tiny amplifier. And this is powered by this, which is a battery unit, right? Oh, how funny. That just turned on. Actually, we'll just turn it on. I don't care. I like this chick. She talks to us.
AUX mode.
AUX mode. All right, so the reason why I have this, which is battery powered, connected to this amplifier, is I don't take measurements inside. I take measurements outside. And that in itself does, it comes with consequences. It comes with challenges, and those challenges are a long list of different things. If you're taking a measurement outside, you have to be aware and concerned of wind, which is probably the biggest problem that I'm dealing with is here in Texas. The tornado sirens were just on a little bit ago, but there's no tornadoes. They were just doing a little, they're just having some fun. Let's just scare the kids. That's what they do here in Texas. But take measurements outside, and wind is a problem. Jets, airplanes, cars passing by, these are all problems, right? They create noise. In any event, the reason why I choose to measure outside, hence this, whoa, easy there, cowboy, this little battery here connected to this little amplifier is I need distance, right? So in a speaker measurement, distance is your friend. And what I mean by that is this microphone, right, pointing at this tweeter is going to be set up to be 1 meter. That is my distance in which I am measuring from the microphone to the speaker. That's not necessarily the distance that I'm talking about that I need to perform a measurement outside. The distance that I'm referring to is the distance of this speaker to the ground, to the walls, and to the ceiling. I want to remove any reflections as far away as I possibly can. And so when I say I take my measurements outside because I need distance, that's what I'm referring to. And so down below, I have this hydraulic cart, and it has a lever on the back. And what I can do is I can raise this speaker up as high as I can up in the air to where the tweeter is well up off the ground. And this guy is connected to a big studio light stand that I can raise with it. Okay, so I'm getting the speaker high up off the ground. I want this to be as far away from the ground sides, and I'm outside, so I have no ceiling, which is really handy. And I am trying to get away from as many reflections as possible. So now we begin to peel back the primary difference between what my speaker measurement looks like versus an in-room measurement. Because understand this, in an in-room measurement, we're not as concerned about what I just talked about. We actually are measuring the speaker in the room, and so reflections are totally fine. That's all a part of the process. So we have our microphone. Actually, before I get to this, long rod. This is just a copper pipe that I got from Home Depot, and I have just like a little end here to hold the microphone. Usually I'll take like clay, so this isn't so sharp right here. The reason for this is, as I mentioned earlier, distance is our friend, right? We're trying to create as much distance as possible. Early on when I was doing measurements, I just had like this little microphone adapter, microphone holder, and then my stand was right here, right? Well, what I noticed, and Andrew Jones actually helped me figure this out in a quick hurry, was that microphone being so close to the stand, right, which is behind the microphone, was actually showing up in my measurements. It was actually causing an issue or a problem that was affecting the measurement that I was trying to take. And so I didn't come up with this, right? Andrew Jones did. Let's get that part right. He's like, hey, Ron, I can't do an English accent. Ron, I ate some biscuits this morning. That's my English accent. It's awful. Go and get a long rod, Ron. I'm awful. And so I did. And I set this up. This is a really long rod. And then I took my measurements, and that problem that we were seeing in my measurements went away. So Distance is our friend. We're trying to get away from anything that is going to show up in the measurement. That's the goal. So let me walk you through this to the best of my ability, and I'm probably going to screw it up. I have a hydraulic cart, and sitting on this hydraulic cart is a turntable. It's a degree wheel. Okay, you can't see this, but there is a wheel down here with markings on it that tells me the degree in which this speaker is right now. Right now we're at 20 degrees, give or take, okay? And so my first measurement, I'll just show you. Oh. Okay, that's on axis. That's my first measurement. So not a great example here, but pretend this was 39 inches away from the tweeter, right? And so I have all of this hardware connected. I come over here, I press a button, I'm working on button. I press a button, and that button then runs a sweep from the hardware box that we mentioned earlier into our little amplifier, into the speaker, and it goes whoop, whoop. It does two of them, one to wake up the system, and then one for the actual measurement, okay? Microphone captures the data. The data then pops up on the screen, and we have an in-room measurement. Like, Ron, are you no more of that Southern Dr. Pepper? You sound drunk right now. I thought we were doing speaker measurements, not room measurements. Here's the thing. What happened in that particular situation is we have measured without what is called a gate. So we are measuring the full frequency. It sent all 20 to 20 hertz to 20K through that speaker. Whoop, whoop. Microphone's saying, yeah, bro, this is what you told me to do, right? I mean, I'm capturing the speaker with everything else in this outside environment, or if we're doing it in this room, everything is now being taken into consideration. That's not a speaker measurement. And so this is where things get a little bit tricky and difficult, because what we are now going to do is set up what is called a gate. So anytime that you see my speaker measurements, you're going to see something along the lines of gated response, and it will give you, a number, anything ranging from 4 milliseconds gated response to 6, 7, 8 milliseconds gated response. So this is the way this works. This is the best way I can describe it. Think of a gate that opens and closes, a noise gate, if you will, because we're all audio nerds. We should know this. If you ever heard like, a DJ where they're talking and they stop and it's like dead silent, it's because they have a noise gate on the microphone. I use this all the time to where anything that is capturing just my voice, the velocity of my voice, it's on and then it's off, right? It's a gate. Well, a gated response works the same way, and it is based on time and it is based on distance. Okay, these are the two things that we're basing it on. So we have the distance right here, 39 inches, make believe, right? Speaker plays its sweep, and that sweep is hitting off this wall, it's hitting off here, it's hitting off here, and we have this distance and the time arrival, right, of here to here, which at a meter is 2.85 milliseconds, give or take. 2.85 milliseconds is the data that it takes on axis of the tweeter to reach this microphone. And so guess what we're going to do? We're going to say from 2.85 milliseconds, that's when we first see in the software our measurement. We see in what's called an impulse. I'm not going to get into this. It doesn't matter. It looks like a sideways teardrop type thing. It doesn't matter. We see our speaker start to make noise. We see the first part of the whoop, That's the first thing that we're seeing in this software. As we're looking at it, we see that. And so that's the starting point for our gate. We say, all right, we're singing that start of that speaker. We're going to start the gate right there. And then this teardrop thing, right, takes shape. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to the end of it, and we're going to say, you shut your mouth, speaker. You don't do anything else past that. So we now have this teardrop shape. It is time information called an impulse that says, here's the beginning of the gate, here's the ending of the gate. We're going to capture this and we're going to end it. Now, as I was saying earlier, 4 milliseconds is, this is like, if you're familiar with Danny, Danny always does gated measurements in 4 milliseconds. I'm not here to say what's right or wrong here. Danny knows infinite more than I do. So I need to remain humble, but I am trying to extend that gate longer, right? I try to get 6, 7 milliseconds of data. So I want to take this teardrop and I want to soak up as much as I can out of it in time. So I will keep that gate open longer, 4 milliseconds, 5 milliseconds, 6 milliseconds, 7 milliseconds. In order to do that, you need to be further away from your environment, hence up high, away from walls, sky above us, taking measurements outside. It allows me to push the environment back further away from the location of the measurement, hence the tweeter. So that is how I do a measurement. And when we take this gated measurement, right, for 4 milliseconds, 5 milliseconds, 6 milliseconds, 7 milliseconds, before we hit a first reflection, before something shows up in that same data, the floor, the walls, before we see any of that crap in our measurement, what we're doing is we're capturing that data, we're putting it on a screen, and guess what it looks like? It looks like a speaker measurement with a drop-off, an extreme drop-off around 200 hertz. In my example, with my abilities, right, with as far away as I can get the speaker away from the environment, it looks like a frequency response that rises at 200 hertz. And then we see what the speaker is actually doing, right? Without first reflections. The room is now gone. It's just what the speaker's doing. Now, I know what you're asking. Dave G says, God, this is so boring. Oh, I'm sorry, it's boring, man. You don't have to watch. I mean, you can go and take a walk outside. Okay. What was I just saying? I lost my choo-choo. Measurements. Okay, so 200 hertz. We have this rise in the response at 200 hertz that comes up, and then we see the speaker, out as far as the speaker is going to play. The reason why this is that, as you may or may not know, base frequencies, so the lower the frequencies that we're talking about, the longer the wavelength is and the time that it takes for those wavelengths to propagate. And since we have set up a gate where we say we are only going to capture, this information from here to here, then that's what we're going to get. We can't, meaning we can't get base. We're not able to get base because of the limitations of the distance from, the distance from the speaker to the environment, the distance from it to the ground, to the walls, to the ceiling, so on and so forth. So that is to, in a very long explanation, explain the reason why in gated measurements, whether it's mine or Danny's or any gated measurements out there, it is the reason why you will see data from around 200 Hertz and up. And so that answers that. So when video very blurry, I'm sorry to hear that. It's showing clear on my end. I'm sorry about that. Okay. All right. So anyways, we've shown you the hardware. We've explained how I perform a measurement. The next thing I want to kind of walk you guys through is the differences between on axis and off axis. So, and I can't say axis, so let the jokes begin. As I said, this speaker, the M6 Sapphire right now, it's on a turntable, and on this turntable, I can now move this speaker any degree that I want. So when I run my first measurement, which is on axis, we hear the whoop, we have the gate set up, we see our data, which is our on axis response, right? Then the next thing that I am doing is I'm now moving this degree wheel in increments of 10 degrees at a time. So we do 0, we do 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees, 40 degrees, so on and so forth. And so I come down here, and I'm probably making a big mistake right now doing this, but there's your demonstration. I'm now moving the speaker on the degree wheel within these degree increments, So now we're seeing on axis versus this is horizontal off axis. So it's giving you information of, how this speaker is performing when you are actually moving off axis to the loudspeaker, right? And what we're hoping to achieve when we see this information is we're hoping to see, if you can imagine, this straight line of being on axis, we're hoping that we see this just natural, smooth fall away. It's almost like it just slightly just starts to gradually drift, down. What we don't want to see is we don't want to see, like, at a crossover point, we don't want to see a big dip. We don't want to see any weird rises or strange things happening in the response where it shouldn't. We just want to see a smooth and natural fall away. So when I walk you guys through a review where I'm talking about, the fall away of a measurement, that's what I'm referring to, like, wow, the fall away on, this Sapphire speaker as the example looks brilliant because it's just naturally dropping off. And that's what we would hope to see. So I do horizontal off axis measurements, and then I do vertical measurements. Now, the vertical measurements are a little bit different in that we now go back to on axis. So speaker is now facing us, the microphone, and what I do is I always have tape with me just to do a marker on my light stand. I put a marker there, and then I raise this up just a few inches at a time, and I shoot again. So every 4 inches, I'm now taking a new measurement, and I'm raising this microphone up as I'm taking those measurements, and that's what is ultimately giving me my vertical response. So now I have data that I can rely on for on axis, horizontal axis, and then vertical axis. So what happens as we move this microphone up? And there are some times where, depending on the speaker, I will do the opposite with vertical, where I will move down if I'm trying to, figure something out. So that covers basically the crux of my measurements, and at least the way in which I do the measurements. So this is kind of the process. It takes about, I don't know, maybe about an hour and a half to conduct measurements. And when I'm done and I'm back to my on axis and I'm looking at everything, There's a couple of other things that I can do, which is very useful. And one of those things is I can, within the software, take a look at what's called the spectral decay. Now, this is time information of the loudspeaker. So at the top of a spectral decay, you guys have seen this, it's like a waterfall. That's the response up on top. If you take a look at the top of the waterfall, that same response, if you compare it with the on-axis measurement, it's the same thing. And then this waterfall, the spectral decay that is coming out towards you, what that is telling us is how long is this particular speaker playing this frequency sweep before it stops, before it's like, I'm done with that frequency. And this has been probably one of the biggest revelations of when I hear something that is either quick, fast to resolve, incredibly transparent, if it just sounds like there is a speediness in the speaker, it almost always comes with a spectral decay that is clean, meaning the waterfall that we look at, it just all has this quick drop off, and at no particular frequency, right, whether it's 2K, whether it's 5K, whether it's whatever, we don't see one particular leg of this waterfall shooting out in like a weird way. It's not popping out at you. Anytime that I do hear a loudspeaker, I spend time with a loudspeaker, that I'm listening to it and I am just sitting there going, there is something funky going on with these female vocals or electric guitars. It's typically in the upper mid-range. There is something that is just driving me insane. It's making me crazy. Or this tweeter is constantly calling attention to itself. Often, right, if not all of the time, what I do see and what I do discover is that when I do look at the spectral decay, it's there. We can see this particular frequency where this leg is shooting out, right? This particular part of that spectral decay is not clean. It's not a just perfect waterfall that drops off. We have something that is going like this and shooting out. And so what that typically tells me is there is something going on known as stored energy, where that speaker is playing one frequency longer than all the others. So if all these frequencies are doing this and this one's doing this, guess what that does to your ears over time? It drives you crazy. And pretty soon you enter listening fatigue and you are frustrated and you are annoyed and you don't like that speaker anymore. Now, the next thing that I want to talk to you about is the why and the importance behind on-axis, horizontal, and vertical axis measurements. And this is known as, like, the power response of a speaker, or, the room, essentially the sum of all things with that particular loudspeaker. A lot of folks would say, this is the myth. Let me bust the myth. A lot of folks would say, hey, when I sit down to listen to a loudspeaker, I'm sitting in the sweet spot. So the only thing that matters is, the on-axis response. So save your breath about how the horizontal, because I'm not sitting over there, so who gives a rat's rear end? That is a myth, right? And a lot of audiophiles, unfortunately, they think that way. They think, well, Ron, I don't care about the vertical because I'm not standing up when I'm listening to music. I'm not doing that, right? Or, well, Ron, I'm not over here when I'm, critically listening to music. And here's the thing. What you're hearing on access is not just that, right? You're not hearing just this in a straight line. The sum of everything that you are hearing, soundstage, spatial cues, harmonic structure, decay, all of it is based on this combined with what it did as it bounced off the ground and then hit your ears, combined with what it did once it hit off the wall and then came back as a late arrival, as it hit the ceiling and then arrives. All of those things are the power response of the speaker. All of these things you are hearing at the same time. And so when I mentioned earlier what we want to see in both a vertical and as well as a horizontal response is we want to see this natural fall away, right? We don't want to see some big giant hole in the response where the crossover is. We don't want to see this kind of wonky behavior going on. We don't want to see a roller coaster. The reason why is that in the end, as we hear the sum of everything, if on axis is close to matching off horizontal response, off axis, I'm trying to avoid saying axis because I can't say it. If it closely matches that, right, what we hear here is similar to what we hear here or up here or down here, then guess what that means? It means you're probably going to like that loudspeaker. The good chances are you're probably going to enjoy the sound of that loudspeaker, right? And so this I know to be true because I've seen enough data to understand that this is a winning formula, that when the sum of these responses share similar characteristics, that generally is a speaker that I enjoy, that just plays everything well, and it does a great job doing it. So that covers the seminar section of this, I guess. I'm sorry that, I've been looking at these comments and only a couple stood out. And this is a weird Frequency Friday. I know it's not for everybody. I've done the best that I could of at least trying to help you guys understand how I do this, kind of the method that I use to conduct measurements. And so at this point, I can just open the floor to questions. So hopefully this was helpful. I've always wanted to at least do a video like this where we talk a little bit about, how I do speaker measurements, what I've learned about speaker measurements, and let's dive in. And I'll answer as many questions as I possibly can. If I forgot something, I will, hopefully I remember it. I'm going to just adjust this camera real quick. Actually, maybe I shouldn't. That's a bad idea. I'm just going to roll with it. Let me just move my focus point down a little bit. All right, that's probably good. Whew. All right, gets a little warm back here in the studio. So, one moment. Sorry for the noise. All right. So, I'm tempted to go back and kind of just crank through a lot of these questions. I don't know how many oh boy, there's a lot. What I might end up having to do, to be honest with you, is I might actually combine a lot of these questions and then do a later video Q&A answering all these questions. I think that's what I'm going to do. But let me at least pick up from now and we'll finish out the show and, we can enjoy the rest of our days. But rest of our day. That sounded morbid. We can enjoy the rest of our days. All right. So the point that I hoped to get across in this video is if you are building a house, a hammer will come in handy. And after working with, doing this for 9 years, talking to a lot of speaker manufacturers, I've never met somebody that would be so dogmatic in nature that they're like, only speaker measurements matter, or speaker measurements don't matter at all. in one way or another, and we could get into debate whether they're doing them well. They're all using a hammer of some kind to build a loudspeaker. How good that hammer is certainly debatable. But it's been my experience that on the back end of building, loudspeakers and people buying loudspeakers, that's where the arguments begin, in this kind of like dogmatic belief system of, you know, only measurements matter or measurements don't matter at all. And I would say that hammers are used to build houses for a good reason, because, well, it helps build the house. And make no mistake, there are companies out there that aren't spending enough time taking a look at things from a subjective lens, listening to their products, and ultimately walking away with, a better sounding loudspeaker. And a lot of these companies are larger companies, they're bigger companies where they're just selling products. Just get the product out, and the design team comes up with a schematic. And this is what I'm about to say is actually the way things are. And so you can be mad at me all you want, but this is the way things actually are with a lot of the bigger companies that are very popular, that a lot of people buy speakers from. Is the engineer team comes up with a design of a circuit. That design is then sent over to China, and it is made as cheap as possible. It now becomes a numbers game. So, blaming the engineers for the official outcome, I don't think that's the right stance. They did their job, and their crossover design might have been okay. It might have been fine. Sometimes it's not, sometimes it is junk, but what ends up happening is the parts that are now thrown onto that circuit board, crossover board, they're pennies, and they're thrown into this loudspeaker, and we buy them, and reviews come out, and some reviews hype that particular product, and they don't do measurements, and people buy those speakers, and many of them end up disappointed. Like, well, this wasn't all that in a bag of peanuts. Over time, I'm noticing that this particular speaker that I bought is a little bit bright, or man, there's just something fatiguing about this particular loudspeaker. And so, as I mentioned earlier, better houses are built with better hammers. And so what that would tell you is that that particular company, they dropped the ball and they made a mistake. And it would be, it would be my job. I feel my job as a reviewer to try to figure that out for you guys. So then I am actually giving you not just my subjective assessment of the loudspeaker, but to tell you why I'm hearing what I'm hearing. So, hopefully that is helpful, hopefully. All right. Okay, so let me just take a look here, see if there are any questions coming up. Speaker is always going to look crooked with frequency that is PEQ. Should be used like sandpaper to flatten the wood smooth, and then use another PEQ to adjust the listening area use. Third PEQ to adjust movie. Techno Dad is in the house. Hey, you know what Techno Dad does with his speakers? He puts them up as high as he can, and that's what it's true. I've been to his house. I've seen it. He's crazy. He's a crazy guy. All right. I think what this person was just saying, I didn't mean to just skim over that. Andy Summers was mentioning about, adding EQ and things like that. So Andy, I disagree. Okay. And this would be a respectful disagreement. When you have a bad crossover design, when you have like holes in the response and issues, when, as I was describing, the sum of everything does not sum, and you have a terrible, vertical or a terrible horizontal. No amount of EQ can fix that. You can't add back something that's been taken away, from the get-go. It's just not going to happen. If anything, you're just going to make a mess somewhere else. So I don't subscribe to the idea that, hey, you bought a crappy loudspeaker, just EQ the heck out of it and everything's going to be okay. I don't feel that way. At the same time, I'm not opposed to the idea of EQ, but you need to start with something that was good to begin with. Making a minor adjustment on EQ is perfectly fine. And if you started with something that is relatively, linear in response, if you want to bump up the bass, then by all means, go for it, man. Rock and roll. But make no mistake, if the sum of the crossover doesn't meet and there's a huge hole in the response, you can't make an EQ just go magically bring that back like unicorns. It doesn't work that way. So I'd have to disagree with, just EQing things. All right, so here we go. Dave G is asking, do you like waveguides? Yes, I do. Waveguides can save your butt in bad rooms, tricky situations where, perhaps you have, one wall over here and no wall over there, right? And so you've got a room that is challenging. And so here we are talking about trying to get this, power response from the speaker or a linear response from the speaker. And guess what? You can't because you don't have a wall over here. Well, that's where a waveguide can save your butt. So in weird rooms that are not symmetrical, that is the entire purpose of controlled directivity. It is controlling, right? Hence the name controlled directivity. It is controlling the direction of said waves, right? And so it's trying to funnel them in a way to where, I don't give a crap if you don't have a wall over there. We're gonna make this work, and that can lend itself to a better sounding loudspeaker or environment or whatever the case may be. So yeah. AJC9988 at New Record Day. When you do off access, do you keep microphone facing straight or do you toe it in to point at the tweeter point or source? That's a great question, and yes, I do. So especially with vertical, as you move up, right, if you can imagine this microphone moving up, well, guess what you just did? You now change the distance of that to the microphone up here. And so the direction of the microphone and also the distance from the tip of that microphone to the tweeter is important to nail. It's difficult. This is hard to do, like when you're by yourself and you're up there on a ladder and you're trying to, get it all perfect. But I do strive to, before I do every measurement, I am taking the tape measure. Am I still at 39 inches away? And am I still, tilted and looking? Is everything correct? So to answer your question, yes, that is a great question. Douglas Blake, Ron, 9 out of 10 times I use measurements to verify what I'm hearing. I don't get why the objective and subjective aren't helping each other. There's times where that can happen. Here's the thing. One of my favorite speakers of all time is the Anthony Gallo reference 3.1s, along with even the Stratas. Hands down, one of my favorite loudspeakers of all time. And one of the reasons why I like it so much is its ability to stage, right? You can get that speaker to completely disappear. And so when I learned how to measure loudspeakers and I measured those loudspeakers, I was really disappointed. I got to be honest. It's not awful. I mean, it's not awful, but it's not great. And especially the vertical on that ribbon, you move up and down and that thing just craps the bed. And so, yeah, I hear you, man. That can happen. There's no doubt about it, Douglas. So yeah, sometimes that can be the case. All right, Cheap Audio Man doesn't do measurements. What is the value of not doing measurements? Cheap Audio Man has a lot of you guys fooled to be honest with you. He actually has done measurements and he understands them, and he is intelligent enough to grasp a lot of these concepts. Um, and so I think where Randy landed, and I don't have any issue with this, it's not my stance and it's not necessarily how I feel, but I think where he landed is he's riding that line of, if you like what you got, then so be it. We agree there. If you subjectively enjoy whatever that speaker is, no matter how it measures, if you just simply like it for what it is, we can break bread. Come on over, leave your speaker at home because I'm probably not going to like it. I'm kidding. Bring your speaker, come over, we'll smoke up some brisket, we'll hang out, we'll listen to music, we'll have a great time. And Randy does not do this, and I'm grateful for it. Where I think that a line can be crossed is when that particular person or that reviewer then takes it a step further and says, not only do I like it, but this speaker is freaking perfect. It is the cat's pajamas across the board. Because guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to investigate what kind of a hammer they used, if they used a hammer to build the house. And I'm going to come back, and if I see a hole in the response, or if I see, some wonkiness going on in the spectral decay, then I'm going to have to put my foot down and say, hey, you can say you like it, but you can't say that it is perfect, that it is unbelievable in every single category. You can say that you love it, and now I'm hoping to help you understand why you love it. Like, hey, maybe you like a V curve, maybe you like hiked bass and no mid range and a lot of top end, maybe that's a sound that you enjoy. And that's, I think, the biggest, takeaway is that measurements can just help you understand why you like or why you don't like something, right? Measurements don't determine if you're going to like it. It can help you understand, if and why, just the if and why behind it all. My phone is going bananas over here. So yeah, excuse me, I said that wrong. I got distracted. Measurements are not going to tell you if you're going to like the loudspeaker. It will help you understand why or why not you might not like that particular loudspeaker. I want to make sure I said that right because it's important. Loudspeaker measurements are getting really good. What intrigues me are measurements for things like DACs. Why makes this sound good? Obviously not measurements we have now. Yeah, measurements with electronics, DACs, amplifiers, things like that. I am humble enough to tell you I have no clue. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have the equipment. I don't have the knowledge. I don't even understand half of those measurements. I really honestly don't, and I don't like to lie or pretend that I'm Mr. Know-it-all. I do have an understanding of speaker measurements, and therefore I can weigh in and give a valid opinion about, like I am today, what I think about them and why I think when they matter and when they don't matter. But with like amplifiers and things like that, DACs, I don't know. I understand some of the basics, but I will tell you, and I just dropped a video talking about this, is again, if the dogmatic view is of the DAC that only the measurements matter, that has not been my experience. And it wasn't my experience with this Lox G DAC that, measures great. And that's awesome, but that doesn't lead me to fall in love with that DAC. It didn't tell me that I'm going to love that DAC, because quite frankly, I don't. It's just okay. For me, a Bifrost 2 is a better option. I think it just sounds more interesting, and it's doing things that I'm listening for better than that particular DAC. So, that's where it's like, okay, well, 1 + 1 didn't equal 2 in that particular scenario. So those are my thoughts on that. All right. Inexperience, ignorance, but since they ignore criticism, we can call it stupidity. But yes, methods of his measuring is incorrect, which negatively affects performance drastically. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Fox and Roses. If you can explain, I don't know if you're talking about me or somebody else, I'm not sure, but let me know. There are a big difference in houses from slapped together with highly crafted but still houses. Speakers are probably the same. John, you are exactly right. Techno Dad, hey, speak for yourself about that terrible horizontal. Laugh out loud. I hear I have an awesome horizontal. It's debatable, Techno Dad. It's debatable. Just do room treatment and enjoy your music. I agree. I agree with the importance of acoustic treatment. No need to necessarily disagree. I think that if you have a crappy speaker, you could do all the acoustic treatment in the world, and it's still not going to fix that speaker. But acoustic treatment is critical, super important. All right. CDR, even good measured speakers sound like crap after all. I guess that would come down to the person listening to the speaker, and you may feel that way about a particular speaker that measures well. I think that if a speaker ends up measuring well, meaning the engineers did a good job with the crossover and everything is kind of pointing in the direction of, yeah, this is all solid, this is all solid engineering, and you still don't like it, then there might be more to the picture. There might actually be that situation that I mentioned earlier where that the crossover inside there is as complex as your windshield wipers. The crossover in your windshield wipers, and probably costs less than that. So again, pennies to the dollar, cheapest of the cheapest components in there, and that very well might lead to, a well-engineered speaker that still doesn't sound all that great. Where I don't agree with you is the blanket statement that even all good measuring speakers sound like crap. That's just nonsense, and it's just not true. So I don't paint with broad brushes when it comes to that kind of stuff. It's been my experience in spending a lot of time with a lot of different speakers and measuring those speakers that often there is a correlation of speakers that do measure well are typically speakers that perform well across the board. Speakers that I generally like and enjoy. That's typically been my experience. So yeah. Let's see here. New Record Day, what is your opinion to DSP to help correct with shortcomings for ones that can be addressed for some speakers or for room correction? Yeah, my opinion has, it's changed over the years. And I used to think like, no amount of room correction can do jack to help you out. My stance has changed a little bit with Dirac in that there are going to be some things where if you cannot treat a room, I'm going to close this door, give me a second here. If you cannot treat a room with any kind of room treatment, and let's say you have, issues with bass, then in that example, I think that using something like Dirac is, it can definitely help, and you should consider doing it. So I think that I like your word shortcomings. If something isn't just quite perfect, I think that can save the day and help you out. All right, let's see here. Some of the best sounding speakers to me are full range single drivers. They actually measure pretty poorly in the upper frequencies. A tweeter has much better frequency response, smoother. Yeah, Mike. And see, here's the thing is this is where that's fine. Yeah, it's like, hey, if that's a sound that you appreciate and you enjoy, who am I to sit here and tell you that you're wrong? Like, I don't have your ears. I might not be listening to some of the traits that you enjoy. So this is the point that, that I continue to try to make is I don't get to tell you you're wrong for liking a wideband driver, and for the most part, I don't, I don't really enjoy those all that much. There was a time when I did, and later on, I just started noticing some things about it that I didn't necessarily appreciate or like, and that's okay, man. Like, great, fantastic, cool. You like it? Rad. Let's move on. Let's not, beat each other up about it and get crazy like, you're an idiot, Mike, for liking those wideband drivers. No, you're not. Dude, If you enjoy that, then awesome, you know. All right, put into perspective, use measurements to eliminate this dumb thing. Put it in perspective, use measurements to eliminate the stinkers, use your ears to choose the acceptable ones. Sure, that seems fine. Star Trek 4, The Golden Gate Bridge, seeing Kirk Spock has had the stem track improved on the cycle. I'm not sure. Whoa, that's going way out there. Should an amplifier and a DAC not change the sound? Should an amplifier and DAC not change the sound? I guess this could come down to, you know, are you a purist? You know, is your intention or hope to keep the integrity of, you know, the music intact, or do you want things to be colored in one way or another? And I enjoy both. That's the thing about me is you know, as a good example, that Lampezator DAC that I reviewed a while back, I'm convinced that that was just painting with a slightly vibrant brush, and I liked that about it. I thought that this isn't necessarily what I would describe as completely pure. There seems to be a color in here that I enjoy. And so in that example, I enjoyed it and I celebrated it. At the same time, you know, like with my May DAC, that's a reference DAC that it's not painting with a vibrant brush. It's painting with neutral, right? It's not going to add or subtract or take anything away or, you know, try to emphasize one thing over the other. So that's that. Yeah. Acoustic treatments can't fix port or box resonance. That is true. When are we going to see benchmark gear reviews? NM Nate, thanks for the question. I would say we're about a month out, realistically, probably a month out. Ron, can you give us an update on the availability of M3s? I can't. I don't know for sure what the availability on M3s looks like for spatial right now. The last time I talked to Clayton, he's working hard on making that happen and expedite that to the best of his ability. A lot of manufacturers, guys, they need some grace right now because there are a lot of things going on that are definitely beyond their control. You know, we're talking about, you know, factories literally shutting down, like big factories that make speakers, that put magnets on speakers. They're shutting down because of COVID, or they can't get a magnet to put on the back of a woofer because of COVID. And so that is slowing everything down. And, you know, I'm sure that your patience and grace is appreciated by all of these manufacturers. It's a big problem right now. So I don't know about the availability. I do know that this little guy, which is the M6, and there's also an M4, like a small, medium, and a large is the concept that Spatial is going with, which I think is brilliant. This is for small rooms, designed for small rooms. The M4 is designed for medium rooms, and then the M3 is designed for, you know, larger rooms. And though the M6 and the M4, if I'm not mistaken, available. Drivers in stock. We can throw these things together. So get in line if you want a great open baffle speaker that is going to be great for smaller and medium rooms. Then you definitely have my permission to pull the trigger. They're both fantastic. And yes, I will be reviewing both the M6 as well as the M4. And yes, I will also include measurements to back up every ridiculous hyperbole driven BS that word salad that I throw out there. I'll be able to back it up and say, and here's why it's awesome. So I will do that. All right. So the conversation should happen in Joe and Tell's summit event. Okay. You know, I hope that a lot of you guys are at least getting something out of this. You know, I know that there was a comment in there that kind of rubbed me the wrong way, like, oh, this is boring. You know, it's like, okay, well, you're the bozo that clicked on a video of a dummy trying to walk you through measurements to the best of his ability. I'm sorry it wasn't, you know, the most fun thing in the world, but can't please everybody, and I don't try anymore. So yeah, I hope you guys are appreciating at least some of you guys are appreciating what I'm trying to do. My walls, ceiling covered wedge tiles, so I don't hear the short echo as where headphones, well, even in room echo is still there. Now I hear soundtrack, I clap my hands, no echo. Awesome, Andy, that's great. If you don't like good measuring speakers, get some Bowers and Wilkins. Oh my goodness. You know what's funny about that is, even Abbey Road uses, the big Bowers and Wilkins. And I always wondered how those measure, what those are all about. I have no idea. That's funny though. That made me laugh. One wonders why the speakers, hold on. Let me just take a look here. Hold on. I got sidetracked here. One wonders why the speakers he bought that got great reviews sounds horrible in their room. It's because their room sucks. John, that can be true, but it might actually be two things. It might be that the speaker sucks and the room sucks, right? Can you put a great measuring speaker in a bad room and expect it to be unbelievable? No. But at the same time, you can never expect ever a really disaster of a loudspeaker put in a bad room to do anything that is amazing. It's just never, it's not going to happen. It's not, I'm sorry. Like, it's not going to happen. Not in my experience, at least. Maybe you have different ears than me, but I've seen too many bad eggs that measure like dog turds, and there's just no room. Even my room that I do acoustically treat, it doesn't save it. It doesn't come in and save the day. If anything, you're just hearing all of the flaws, like with more clarity, like, oh, you really didn't know what you're doing when you're making the speaker. Let's just take a look here. Do you guys see the amount of interest in this hobby increasing? That's a good question, Nathan. I don't know. I hope so. Without measurements, is it possible for reviews to be anything but subjective? I'd say it's going to be their opinion, at that point, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't buy into this idea that a reviewer has to measure for the review to be valid. I don't buy that for even a second. I think that it's just all in the way they unpack the review, the way they talk to you about what they liked and what they didn't like. And if they can articulate, what it is that they are hearing, and they have good ears and they have the experience under their belt, then that's great, and then I think that if it ends up, on my desk and I measure it, I might be able to actually enforce and give credence to that particular review. Like, hey, yeah, they were spot on. That's exactly what happened over here, So, yeah. Let's see here. Every room size is different, so sound will be different in audio shop and your home. That is true. Yep. Looks like you guys are talking to each other. I'm just looking for some questions. Bear with me here. Ron, what can be gathered from measurements to show the differences between open baffle speaker versus a boxed speaker? That's a great question. When I mentioned the spectral decay earlier, one trait that you will see with a well-designed open baffle loudspeaker is how quick that it is in that spectral decay, how clean the waterfall is. But you can also see that in a box speaker as well. So I don't want to mislead you into thinking only open baffle speakers have great waterfalls. That's not true. But generally speaking, you will see like a speedier response in the waterfall, or a cleaner waterfall, if you will, with a well-engineered open baffle loudspeaker. Now, where things get problematic and they're beyond my ability to measure because of just the way that I measure, which we just spent all this time talking about, is where you might see some interesting data would be in bass, open baffle bass, but I can't get down that low. I'm getting down to 200 and that's it. And so the way in which a box speaker loads a room is entirely different than that of a open baffle, subwoofer or woofer that is playing bass. There's a shift in energy from, front to back or back to front, with open baffle, whereas, with a box speaker, there is pressure that builds up, right? And so it's the way in which those two operate are vastly different. And it'd be interesting to see data that would back that up, but I don't have the ability to. But I would imagine you would see fundamentally different patterns, and you would see different different measurements. Different measurements would, in polar response, all of that would look different with Open Baffle than it would with a boxed speaker. No doubt about that. All right, let's take a look here. Dave G asks, by the way, how you doing, Dave? Do you think that vinyl will continue to grow, and is it better than high-res digital? That's a loaded question. I would say that it depends, and similar to the whole concept and idea of this particular video, I think that it just depends, man. I think that it can, and then sometimes it just won't. I think that digital can be better, and I think it just comes down to how was it originally recorded in the studio? How was it originally mixed? How was it originally mastered? I think all of those things make a huge difference. And so I'll put it to you like this. I have never listened to a digital version of one of my favorite albums of all time, Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd, analog, right? I've never heard a digital version ever that rivals my original pressing or my made in Japan pressing on a good or very good vinyl playback. It just doesn't come close to the real thing, And so in that example, that wins. On the flip side, another artist that I love is Blake Mills, and he came out with this album called Hi Ho, and it was all digitally recorded, right? From beginning to end, totally digital. And I play that back and I listen to it on CD, and it sounds superior to the vinyl record that I also bought. It just sounds better to me. I think a lot of it just comes down to, what were they trying to achieve? What were they going for? And this kind of leads into a conversation or a video that Randy put out about, you have no idea what the artist's intent is. And sometimes you don't, it's like, that's just a myth. That's just ridiculous. That's audiophile chit chat where they're just, spewing out nonsense that they think they know what the artist's intent. What's interesting about that example that I just gave, the Blake Mills record, is I do know his intent because in a Guitar Player magazine, he actually talked about it. And he talked about, he's a producer as well. He produces records. And he's like, we had a lot more latitude to work with digital. And so that's the reason we focused on the sound quality with digital. They worked hard on getting it right. And I think that in the end, that CD sounds better than the record. It just sounds better. There's just more information. There's more dynamics. There's more detail. There's everything packed into that CD. So long-winded, but two very specific, two specific examples. All right. I'm getting worn out. We're an hour and 17 minutes in. I'm going to finish up with just a few more questions and we're going to call it a day. So, man, I'm hot. That was a lot. This was a lot to take on. Hopefully I did okay. Anyways, let me see if there's anything that stands out. Thanks for taking around. Little fat. Anything at Ron? Okay, here we go. Dave G again. Ron, I do love your videos and I have been following you since the early days. Keep up the good work. Dave G, thank you, man. I appreciate you. I appreciate your feedback. Thank you. That means a lot to me. I've never seen you review about Rega. That's true. Yeah, I've had a hard time getting my hands on a Rega. I don't know if they just don't need YouTube exposure. I don't get it. I've asked so many times that I'm just like, all right, well, it's their loss. And I don't mind saying that at this point. If they don't want to send me a table, then it's their loss. And maybe I can get one through, one of my sponsors or one of those guys. Maybe I can make that happen. So I'll try to. Check out the new Luxman integrated. Yeah, I'd be happy to work with Luxman. I can definitely do that. Ron, I came in late. Did I miss anything about the red spatials behind you? Not a whole lot. I didn't really talk all that much about them. These are the Spatial Audio M6s. They have two 10-inch drivers. It's a 2.5-way design with the same, M100 Uniwave Sapphire driver as the M3s and also the M4s. So what Spatial is doing, and we'll be talking about this very soon, and I'll be reviewing both the M6 as well as the M4, is they now have a Sapphire for every size room, for every size situation. This guy being the smallest of the bunch. So this is designed for smaller environments, smaller rooms, listening rooms. And they also have an M4, which is designed for medium rooms. And then the M3, which is designed for larger rooms, larger listening rooms. So I love that concept and I'm excited to check them out. And what I love about Clayton and what he does is he refines, it's like, we'll get to it, but like just the refinements that he's always doing. It's like he's never quite totally satisfied. And I love that about that guy. Dave G, Ron, you should be a politician. No, I should not. I should not be a politician. No, thank you. But I think you mean that as a compliment. So thank you, but no, thank you. Holy smokes. Have you tried Open Baffle speakers with sealed subwoofers for the lower octave? Do they blend well? They can. I have tried that. It's not my favorite type of a situation, to be honest with you. I think that Open Baffle bass is really where it's at. Like that's the foundation. And when you hear that Open Baffle bass, you don't want, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at my beautiful wife and my cute kid, Natalie, who's not napping, clearly. Yeah. Not Napoli. So yeah, let me just take a look here. I don't think they can blend, but they will never blend as well as Open Baffle in both situations. Bud, you just went up in my books. Pink Floyd's Timeless Masterpiece. Kudos. Absolutely, man. I can listen to that record anytime, and I am just so happy. All right. Shouldn't there be a standard for measurements, components, so many variables, room treatment kit, etc.? The controls of each scientific measurement are all over the place. How I trust consistency. I wish there was, especially when it comes to things like impedance. And that was something that we didn't discuss. I do have the ability to actually measure impedance, with my Clio measurement system. And speaker sensitivity is another one that I get crabby about. It's like, don't tell me your speaker is 104 dB sensitivity. Yeah. Reminds me of a similar story I told my wife before she found out the truth. Yeah. Liar. What's wrong with you? 104 dB? No, it's not. Try like 92, 89, 90, maybe. And the same thing with impedance. It's like these guys, they just, this is an 8-ohm speaker. I take a look at its impedance and I'm like, on what planet are you on? No, it's not. It's a 4-ohm speaker or it's a 6-ohm speaker. So yes, there should be some kind of a standard, and unfortunately there's not. And I think that is another reason why maybe having some objective data, again, taking a look at some objective data can be very helpful to help understand when it's just a load of BS, right? Like, no, that's not true. Like the way you said you built that house, you didn't use a hammer, you used a chicken. Like, who uses a chicken to build a house? What's wrong with you? So, there you go. Ron, do you think that music is improving? Man, I've been in a drought with music lately. I don't know. I think that it is, and I think that it isn't. I think that because I think that artists are, for the most part, as free as they've ever been, right? It's like they're as free as they have ever been in the history of music. Artists, like, you literally right now could learn how to play guitar, plug in a mic, record a song, and share it. And it may do well and it might not. It's not a matter of, which label that you're under or which company that you're with that ultimately defines your artistic talent and whether people are going to appreciate that artistic talent. I think that we're just kind of living in an interesting era in music where they're just kind of free to do what they want. I think that's great. The challenge is finding them. And that's, of course, where like big labels come into play, you know, and it's like finding those artists can be a little bit challenging. I think that it's improving and I think that it's getting better. But yeah, I'm kind of in a drought lately. I haven't been able to find anything new that's been really all that captivating lately. So I don't know. All right. Let's take a look here. See if there's anything else in here that I can knock out before we finish up. Okay. I think I got most of the stuff that was directed at me. Hour and 25 minutes. I don't know if this was a good video or not, but I wanted to take a chance. That's not something that I'm afraid to do here on my channel, is I take risks. And I wanted to kind of walk you through my stance on measurements. So just to finalize, when speaker measurements matter is when you want to understand why you like something or why you don't like something. There is a good possibility that you might be able to find those in measurements. When don't they matter? It's when you find a loudspeaker that you just love. And that's that. That's the end of it. You just love it. Kind of like you love a kid. Come here, Nat. Come here. You know, I mean, she can be a handful. I don't know, she measures what, 42 inches? It's the only measure. I don't know how tall she is.
42 inches. That's like Brenda's height.
Really? I guess I'm not. How tall are you? 38? I just measured Natalie. Not perfect, but I love her. So that's when measurements don't matter, is if whatever loudspeaker that you bought or that you're spending time with, if it gets you to sit down and listen to music and enjoy it, then you won. You now get to just not buy another loudspeaker and enjoy it. So those are my thoughts, and we will see you guys in the next video. I'm gonna get you, Natalie.